ʻmʌri. Newton Rothbard was an American heterodox economist of the Austrian School, a revisionist historian, and a political theorist whose writings and personal influence played a seminal role in the development of modern libertarianism. Rothbard was the founder and leading theoretician of anarcho-capitalism, a staunch advocate of historical revisionism, and a central figure in the 20th-century American libertarian movement. He wrote over 20 books on anarchist theory, revisionist history, economics, and other subjects. Rothbard asserted that all services provided by the monopoly system of the corporate state could be provided more efficiently by the private sector, and wrote that the state is the organization of robbery systematized and writ large. He called fractional reserve banking a form of fraud and opposed central banking. He categorically opposed all military, political, and economic interventionism in the affairs of other nations. According to his protege Hans Hermann Hoppe, there would be no anarcho-capitalist movement to speak of without Rothbard. Rothbard was a heterodox economist. Economist Jeff Herberner, who calls Rothbard his friend and intellectual mentor, wrote that Rothbard received only ostracism from mainstream academia. Rothbard rejected mainstream economic methodologies and instead embraced the praxeology of his most important intellectual precursor, Ludwig von Mises. To promote his economic and political ideas, Rothbard joined Llewellyn H. Lew Rockwell, Jr., and Burton Blumert in 1982 to establish the Ludwig von Mises Institute in Alabama. Life and work. Education. ʻmʌri. Rothbard's parents were David and Ray Rothbard, Jewish immigrants who had immigrated to the U.S. from Poland and Russia respectively. David Rothbard was a chemist. Rothbard was born in the Bronx, but the family moved to an apartment on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, where he attended Birchwathen, a private school on the Upper East Side. According to Rothbard, Birchwathen gave tuition subsidies to middle-class boys such as himself in order to maintain gender balance in the school. Local families tended to send their sons to other, more prestigious schools. Rothbard later stated that he much preferred Birchwathen to the debasing and egalitarian public school system he had previously attended in the Bronx. Rothbard wrote of having grown up as a right-winger, among friends and neighbors who were communists or fellow travelers. Rothbard characterized his immigrant father as an individualist who embraced the American values of minimal government, free enterprise, private property, and a determination to rise by one's own merits. To Rothbard, all socialism seemed to me monstrously coercive and abhorrent. He attended Columbia University, where he received a Bachelor of Arts degree in mathematics in 1945 and, 11 years later, his Ph.D. in economics in 1956. The delay in receiving his Ph.D. was due in part to conflict with his advisor, Joseph Dorfman, and in part to Arthur Burns rejecting his doctoral dissertation. Burns was a longtime friend of the Rothbard family and the neighbor at their Manhattan apartment building. It was only after Burns went on leave from the Columbia faculty to head President Eisenhower's Council of Economic Advisers that Rothbard's thesis was accepted and he received his doctorate. Rothbard later stated that all of his fellow students there were extreme leftists and that he was one of only 2 Republicans on the Columbia campus at the time. During the 1940s, Rothbard became acquainted with Frank Chodorow and read widely and libertarian-oriented works by Albert J. Nock, Garrett Garrett, Isabel Patterson, L. Mencken and others, as well as Austrian economist Ludwig von Mises in the early 1950s. When Mises was teaching at the Wall Street Division of New York University Business School, Rothbard attended Mises' unofficial seminar. Rothbard was greatly influenced by Mises' book, Human Action. Rothbard attracted the attention of the William Volcker Fund, a group that provided financial backing to promote various right-wing ideologies in the 1950s and early 1960s. The Volcker Fund paid Rothbard to write a textbook to explain human action in a form which could be used to introduce college undergraduates to Mrs. Views. A sample chapter he wrote on money and credit won Mises' approval. For 10 years, Rothbard was paid a retainer by the Volcker Fund, which designated him a senior analyst. As Rothbard continued his work, he enlarged the project. The result was Rothbard's book Man, Economy, and State, published in 1962. Upon its publication, Mises praised Rothbard's work effusively. Marriage, employment, and activism. In 1953, in New York City, he married Joanne Schumacher, whom he called Joey. Joanne was his editor and a close advisor, as well as hostess of his Rothbard Salon. They enjoyed a loving marriage, and Rothbard often called her the indispensable framework behind his life and achievements. According to Joey, patronage from the Volcker Fund allowed Rothbard to work from home as a freelance theorist and pundit for the first 15 years of their marriage. The fund collapsed in 1962, leading Rothbard to seek employment from various New York academic institutions. He was offered a part-time position teaching economics to the engineering students of Brooklyn Polytechnic Institute in 1966, at age 40. This institution had no economics department or economics majors, and Rothbard derided its social science department as Marxist. However, Justin Raimondo writes that Rothbard liked his role with Brooklyn Polytechnic because working only 2 days a week gave him freedom to contribute to developments in libertarian politics. Rothbard continued in this role for 20 years, until 1986. Then 60 years old, Rothbard left Brooklyn Polytechnic Institute for the Butt Business School at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, where he held the title of S.J. Hall Distinguished Professor of Economics, an endowed chair paid for by a libertarian businessman. According to Rothbard's friend, colleague and fellow Misesian economist Hans Hermann Hoppe, Rothbard led a fringe existence in academia, but was able to attract a large number of students and disciples through his writings, thereby becoming the creator and one of the principal agents of the contemporary libertarian movement. Rothbard maintained his position at UNLV from 1986 until his death. Rothbard founded the Center for Libertarian Studies in 1976 and the Journal of Libertarian Studies in 1977. In 1982, he co-founded the Ludwig von Mises Institute in Auburn, Alabama, and was vice president of academic affairs until 1995. The Institute's Review of Austrian Economics, a heterodox economics journal later renamed the Quarterly Journal of Austrian Economics, was also founded by Rothbard in 1987. After Rothbard's death, Joey reflected on Rothbard's happiness and bright spirit. He managed to make a living for 40 years without having to get up before noon. This was important to him. She recalled how Rothbard would begin every day with a phone conversation with his colleague Llewellyn Rockwell. Gales of laughter would shake the house or apartment as they checked in with each other. ʻmʌri thought it was the best possible way to start a day. Rothbard was irreligious and agnostic toward the existence of God, describing himself as a mixture of an agnostic and a Reform Jew, despite identifying as an agnostic and an atheist. Rothbard was critical of the libertarian hostility to religion. In Rothbard's later years, many of his friends anticipated that he would convert to Catholicism, but he never did. The New York Times obituary called Rothbard an economist and social philosopher who fiercely defended individual freedom against government intervention. Conflict with Ayn Rand. In 1954, Rothbard, along with several other attendees of Mises' seminar, joined the circle of novelist Ayn Rand, the founder of Objectivism. He soon parted from her, writing, among other things, that her ideas were not as original as she proclaimed but similar to those of Aristotle, Thomas Aquinas and Herbert Spencer. In 1958, after the publication of her novel, Atlas Shrugged, Rothbard wrote a fan letter to Rand. calling her book an infinite treasure house, and not merely the greatest novel ever written, but one of the very greatest books ever written, fiction or non-fiction. He also wrote that, "You introduced me to the whole field of natural rights and natural law philosophy," prompting him to learn the glorious natural rights tradition. He rejoined her circle for a few months, but soon broke with Rand once more, over various differences, including his defense of anarchism. Later, Rothbard satirized Rand's acolytes in his play Mozart Was a Red and the essay, The Sociology of the Ayn Rand Cult. Mozart Was a Red was Rothbard's unpublished one-act play written as a farce. Rothbard characterized Ayn Rand's circle as a dogmatic, personality cult. His play parodies Rand and her friends, and is set during a visit from Keith Ackley, a fan of Sand's novel The Brow of Zeus.